And welcome back everybody to another reaction video where we try to learn something new and to spread history on YouTube. So today we are going to react on the video called Winged Hussars, the Polish Cavalry from Sabaton history. So they're probably going to go into a great detail about the Winged Hussars. I don't know much. I don't know much in detail about them, but I know about that time period where the Winged Hussars were mostly active. That was like 17th and 16th century, I think. But yeah, let's just jump in. And as always, you can subscribe, hit the ring bell thingy if you want to see other videos. You can also support the channel via Patreon. The link is in the description below. And as always, the link to the original video is going to be in the description below. So give them a like and a view, and you can subscribe to them if you like the concept, how they make videos. So yeah, let's just jump in. And also you can give your thoughts on that topic in the comment section. I appreciate it. And you can also suggest another video in the comment section also to watch for next time. So yeah, let's just jump in.
It was the most desperate hour for Sabaton history.
And then, the Winged Hussars arrive!
When the Winged Hussars arrive!
Contemporary spectators of the late 16th century wholeheartedly agreed that they had never seen such fine cavalry before, nor could they indeed compare such splendor to anything else in Europe at the time. On magnificent parade grounds, the Polish kings displayed the grandeur of their hussars. Clad in highly decorated Karacena armor, with saddles and reins embroidered in gold and precious stones, they rode the finest breeds of horses, donning costumes made of the skins of tigers, leopards, and wolves. They held long lances with large, colorful pennants at the tips, and to top it all off, an awe-inspiring pair of wings that arched from the end of their saddles over their heads, fluttered proudly in the wind. It is no wonder.
Yeah, the Hussars are like really important for like the Polish national history or identity, let's say it that way.
So many romantic tales and a wide array of both true and fictitious legends had been spread around the courts of Europe of these men. The character of the Polish Winged Hussars was in fact a complex hybrid of Western and Eastern culture, coming from the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, geographically the largest country in Europe at the time. Originating in the heavily armored knights of the region in medieval times, they incorporated influences from Russia, the Byzantine Empire, and Mongol cavalry initially.
Yeah, the Polish territory was always like on the border between East and West. So they were mostly targets from the East and the West. So from the Russians and the Holy Roman Empire, and later on Germany, Prussia, and Austria, Hungary, and Habsburg monarchy and everything. Like we know that Poland had a rough time through history, but all the different things that came from East and West, like Poland was a melting pot for that. So it can be also seen in the concept of their army, and especially the Winged Hussars, as he mentioned here. Oh, a nice picture. Nice.
And later from the Balkans and the Ottoman Empire. The influence from Serbian and Hungarian refugees settling there in the wake of the expanding Ottoman Empire began strongly influencing Polish cavalry in the 16th century. Polish noblemen began creating the new heavy hussar, who was equipped with mail shirts, large helmets, the typical Balkan shields, and long lances. The Transylvanian king Stefan Batory further standardized the hussars, ordering them to drop the shield.
One interesting thing. Hus means in Hungarian 20. So a Hungarian friend told me that once, that Hussar actually means the one who's paid 20 forints for his service. And that's the name, like Hus 20, Hussar, the one who's paid 20. But please let me know if it's true, like,
in favor of
if you're Hungarian or Polish.
a thick breastplate. The new heavy hussars indeed became units with which to be reckoned. On the battlefield against the Habsburgs, Moldovans, Muscovites, and Swedes, Polish hussars achieved great triumphs over their enemies.
Yeah.
However, by the 17th century, the winged hussars seemed to be more a product of a bygone age. Most European nations began abandoning the heavy lancers in favor of pike and firearm formations and a mix of various cavalry units. The experience of the 30 Years' War showed that a new era of massed firepower, like the Swedish brigades of Gustav Adolf, easily countered the direct charge of the lancers.
Yeah, Sweden was back then like really a dominant European power. They were actually also considered like the guardians of the Protestant movement. But yeah, as he said, like cavalry back then, when all the firearms weren't like that that spread throughout the armies and so on, cavalry was pretty big back then. But as the time went by, the cavalry, although it's going to be used in the Napoleonic Wars and also in the First World War, but it loses its significance during history.
Was this the end of the Polish winged hussars? The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth faced crisis after crisis, fighting invasions from the east, from Tartars and Ukrainian
really
Cossacks,
unstable.
who destroyed many Polish regiments. It seemed like the winged hussars were doomed to the dustbin of history. Crown Hetman and later King Jan III Sobieski, however, thought differently.
Cannonballs are coming down from the sky. Januaries, are you ready to die?
The Siege of Vienna.
We will seek our vengeance eye for a night.
In the face of the re-emerging threat of the Ottoman Empire's expansion from the Balkans into the heart of Europe, new hussar regiments were to be raised, reviving the spirit of the winged hussars once more. Sobieski called upon...
Just a quick note on this map. Oh, I don't have my mouse here. But yeah, as you can see, like Bulgaria, Greece, Serbia, Montenegro, Bosnia, big parts of Croatia, big parts of Hungary fell. Some of these states are vassal states to the Ottoman Empire. But one of the bigger battles that the Habsburgs lost was in 1526 in Mohacs, and that's approximately here in today's Hungary, near the Croatian border, where the Ottomans just obliterated the Habsburg monarchy. And that's why the Ottomans could push even further. And a big town, and they also captured Buda, today's Budapest, because there were like two parts, Buda and Pest, and then those two combined in today's Budapest. But with the Ottoman expansion back then, you always need to consider the supply lines. And to keep the supply lines afloat, you always needed to take on big forts, big cities, and so on. And one of the big cities back then was Belgrade. It's also a big city today, Belgrade in Serbia, somewhere around here, I would say. And it was called the Key of the Balkans. And as that city fell, the next two big cities, which they needed to capture to be able to move further into Europe, was Buda and Vienna. Because, as I said, of the supply lines. It's a complicated question, and I know we're talking about winged hussars, but I just wanted to put it out there. So, yeah. But the period of Jan Sobieski, it was the period of the so-called the Great Turkish Wars.
Ottoman Empire's expansion from the Balkans into the heart of Europe, new hussar regiments were to be raised, reviving the spirit of the winged hussars once more. Sobieski called upon all worthy sons of Poland, urging patriotic nobles to voluntarily fight against the Ottoman menace and raise their own troop. The state, in fact, contributed very little in reality, and the noblemen and local leaders had to cover most of the expenses themselves. It was advertised as a career investment, though. See, they provided horses, armor, and weapons, and they would serve the king in campaign, and in turn...
That, and also, religion back then was a big part of culture, of everything. And if you had the chance to be the defender of Christianity, so to fight against Muslims, you would also be glorified. So, of course, people would join the Christian army, and also the Sacra League, or the oh God, what's the English word? The Holy League that was established in 1684 after the siege of Vienna, where Venice, the Holy Roman Empire, later on Russia came also into the alliance, but also Poland, Lithuania. They all joined in, and just to get the Turks out, or to beat the Turks, the Ottomans.
Turn were supposed to recover their investment with war booty and lucrative state offices granted by the monarchy. The men accepted into Hussars would make a contract where it would take them up to 2.5 years to pay off their arms and weapons. And if they survived that long, they would earn themselves money and prestige.
Yeah,
it was a complex, flawed system, but for the time it worked. The typical Hussars wore large protective helmets, often embellished with ostrich feathers. They were equipped with Hungarian-style sabers or Polish straight swords, and protected by a lobster-style breastplate, engraved with religious imagery. Now, everyone is of course more interested in the history of the wings. Historians still argue, though, about the exact use of the wings. By the 17th century, they were usually mounted on the back of the saddle, but the argument is whether they were actually worn in battle or were just for show, like the embroidered saddles and decorated swords, or the expensive bows, which were in turn exchanged for wheellock pistols when on campaign. Sadly, we are missing contemporary battle accounts in that regard. But historians in favor of the battlefield theory emphasize that the wings were carried like the leopard skins into battle, to frighten not just the enemy, but also their horses, easily affected by unusual sights. They would come down on their enemies like predatory pegasi. Humor me, okay? Predatory pegasi. That's what they did. The actual important symbol of the Polish Hussar in the field, however, was his lance. Over 5 meters long, 16 feet,
Whoa.
the Polish lance was clearly a one-use weapon. It was made out of light wood, usually pine or fir, and hollowed in...
Just imagine that, 5 meters. Like, holding it while you're charging on a horse. And not dropping it, and then pointing it to the enemy lines. Just crazy.
Parts to make it even lighter. This was fitting for the Hussar style of fighting. It was often said that the Hussars were only good for one day of fighting, but that one day would be the decisive one. And such a day came in the year 1683. In July, the Ottoman army had once again marched northwards, threatening the Habsburg realms and the city of Vienna. An estimated 170,000 Ottoman troops lay siege to Vienna, easily outnumbering the mere 16,000 regular defenders. But despite the clear disparity of forces, the Viennese defenders held out, defying the Ottoman guns for weeks. That heroic last stand, however, could not last forever, as food supplies and the strength of the defending soldiers and citizens began to run out.
Yeah, the siege of Vienna is actually a turning... I'm going to spoil it a little bit, but the Turks are going to be defeated. He is probably going to mention Jan III Sobieski coming in to rescue Vienna. But yeah, the Viennese held the defense. At one point, like the Turks were really close. They tried to bring down the walls with the cannons, and they had really big cannons and a lot of them. But the walls held, and the defenses held. And the last thing that the Ottomans tried was to dig a tunnel underneath the city to put then gunpowder under the walls and then to blast them away that way. Like the scene in Lord of the Rings where the orcs attack the fortress and try to bring those like ball thingies with powder underneath the city walls. It was actually the same thing, but the Viennese eventually found out the tunnels and destroyed the tunnels, and then the Polish came.
Food supplies and the strength of the defending soldiers and citizens began to run out. On the 6th of September, Sobieski crossed the Danube north of Vienna with a force 20,000 strong. He would honor his promise to the Holy League to fight the Ottoman menace once more. At the same time, a large Holy Roman Imperial force under Charles of Lorraine was marching south as well. They would unite their forces under the command of the Polish king. And among his men marched the Polish winged Hussars. By this time, Ottoman sappers had come dangerously close to opening up a breach for the Ottoman troops to take the city by storm. Digging tunnels beneath the walls and filling them with explosives was quite literally a burning fuse under the city. The Ottomans would eventually be successful, despite the valiant resistance of Vienna's inhabitants, and it seemed their fate was already decided. But then, one day, on the far-off horizon, the winged Hussars arrived.
And the winged Hussars arrive, coming down the mountainside. And the winged Hussars arrive, coming down, they turn the tide.
On September 12th, King Jan Sobieski and his winged Hussars came to the relief of the besieged city. The battle had begun the day before, and the troops of Charles of Lorraine were already punching hard into the Ottoman lines. The Ottomans launched several counterattacks, though, preventing the Imperials from breaking through. Ottoman sappers hurriedly were filling new tunnels with explosives, trying to blow the walls, but at the last minute, these were found and destroyed by the Viennese defenders. The next day, as the Polish infantry joined the Imperials, the winged Hussars moved through the cover of the woods, approaching the main Turkish redoubt. Preparing for the decisive strike, the deeply Catholic Hussars held a holy mass, steeled themselves with prayer, and their traditional battle hymn, Bogorodzica, Mother of God. By 4 in the afternoon, together with a group of Imperial horsemen, the Polish cavalry stormed down the hill. In all, they were 18,000 strong, probably the largest cavalry charge in European history. Sobieski personally led the attack at the head of his winged Hussars. At about 100 paces, the real charge began. At 50 paces, their horses were driven to full gallop as the winged Hussars lowered their lances and smashed into the terrified defenders. Lances splintered. Horses trampled men beneath them. Soldiers were crushed and thrown aside. The sight of impaled men before them terrified the men in the rearward units, and their morale crumbled. Most of the Ottoman troops were not protected by plate armor, and their formations broke apart. Some winged Hussars dropped their broken lances and reached for the swords and sabers that hung from knots at their wrists. Others took up war hammers or pistols as they drove through the disordered enemy to safety. They regrouped for another charge, wave after wave, into the Ottoman troops, as more troops of the Holy League joined the battle. Vespasian Koszowski, in his Song of Vienna Liberated, describes it so. No sooner does a hussar lower his lance than a Turk is impaled on its spike, which not only disorders, but terrifies the foe. That blow, which cannot be defended against or deflected, oft transfixing 2 persons at a time. Others flee in eager haste from such sight, like flies in a frenzy. After their decisive victory in the Battle of Vienna, the fame of the Polish Hussars grew once more throughout Europe. The Holy Roman Emperor personally invited them to his court for a demonstration of their skills, and the Russian Tsar raised his own 1,000-strong Hussar army under a Polish renegade. Vienna, however, despite being one of the greatest ones, would also be one of the last victories the Hussars achieved. Soon afterward, the Commonwealth, under pressure both from foreign powers and from within, started coming apart. The huge costs of defensive wars contributed to a
Yeah, I mean, if you just look at what the Hussars were equipped with. The most expensive thing that they probably had was the horse. Like having a horse in medieval time and also in that time was pretty expensive. And then the lance, which is 5 meters, and the breastplates. It's a very expensive army to keep it up for a long time.
General financial decline. There were rebellions, and it was hard to really afford the expensive Hussars anymore. Nonetheless, the Winged Hussars managed to survive well into the 18th century and would be deployed in the Great Northern War. But their decisive role on the battlefield lay behind them. Their imagery, however, survived, and especially in the 19th century, began to re-emerge as a symbol of Polish pride and identity, remembering them from a time when indeed no finer cavalry than the Polish Winged Hussars roamed the battlefields of Europe.
We remember in September, doesn't make the year. Now was green. We made the enemy bleed. And the Winged Hussars arrive. Fire and steel, coming down the mountainside.
Whether or not the Winged Hussars arrived, this is the most requested song of all so far.
So far for the Sabaton history, since we started.
Yep.
Are they?
And this week, actually, it's not this today, but this week actually is 1 year since the channel premiered last February 7th.
What you
So
wanted the
that's
most, we
actually
saved
it.
for the 1 year anniversary.
How many Winged Hussars?
I'm just gonna keep the video going. Yeah, the thing is, the Battle of Vienna was actually a big turning point in the Great Turkish War, where the Turks were defeated massively. The Turks were actually led by Kara Mustafa, the Great Vizier from the Ottoman Empire, and he lost the battle. And after that, after the Holy League was let's say it reestablished in 1684, they started a big offensive against the Ottoman Empire, and that's and the Great Turkish War ended actually in with the Peace of Katowice, oh my God, not Katowice, with the Great Peace of Karlovac, or Sremski Karlovac, however you want to call it, Sremski Karlovac, in 1699, and a big chunk of Hungary, a big chunk of today's Croatia, a northern parts like today's Vojvodina in Serbia were again reincorporated into the Habsburg monarchy, and of course the skirmishes and the little wars here and there would continue throughout the history. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed it very much. I always like to learn something new, and of course, with the Hussars, it's always the question like, what is legend, what was reality, especially not only in Polish. Don't get me wrong, not in Polish tradition, but in general in every nation's tradition. Like when you take those big things that represent you and one of the biggest cavalry chargers in history, of course you need to always look a little bit skeptical about what parts of that story are real and what not. Of course the battle is real, what happened there is real, but as he said at the beginning, the depiction of the Winged Hussars, did they have wings? Is it just a myth? So there's always parts in history that are blank and that need to be filled in, but with time, if there's a new transcript or a book or some, I don't know, eyewitness accounts or something like that, if they come out there, it could be either accepted or declined as a general thing. But yeah, me just rumbling. Okay, so once again, I hope you enjoyed it. You can subscribe, hit the ring bell thingy to watch other videos with me in the future. You can also support the channel, as I said, via Patreon and the future projects that I'm going to make. And also comment down below for the next video that you want me to react to. So yeah, see ya.